Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to share some of the research from the Caribbean, which forms part of the LAC. Most of my research is done using the evidence-based approach, and therefore I would provide you with some evidence of climate change and how climate change policy could be informative, but not generally prescriptive, because I know a lot of people do not like prescriptive systems, because policy is normally more political than it is based on evidence. So just to set the stage, what do we know about climate change? The direct impacts of climate change have been identified, and these include changes in temperature, changes in precipitation, and of course the occurrence of droughts, floods, and other factors, including fires, which were just identified. I know most people have been talking about these factors, but I'm just setting the scene here. In addition, currently, there are a number of factors which contribute and support and forecast that slightest changes in the weather condition can actually affect human health. These changes will exacerbate not only in Latin America and in the Caribbean, but will also have problems. I can't see very well. So, okay, yes. So essentially what would happen is that these countries, especially Latin America and LAC countries, would have problems of vulnerability, because they are small islands. They are in the Caribbean, for example. They were geographically positioned, which would have influences on hurricanes and floods, storm surge, and all of these would put at risk, especially countries that have tourist industries. In both developed and lesser developed countries, there already a problem with flooding, which is not uncommon to developed countries and small island developing states. And these have affected both urban, rural, developed, non-developed. But the important factor here is that although these challenges are equally distributed, the developed world have been able to come out of these natural disasters far more quicker than the less developed countries. And a good example of that is what we see and experience in Haiti versus New Orleans, which has fully recovered and Haiti is still not recovered. So water security, therefore, is identified as a major climate-related issue affecting LAC countries because of local changes in temperature and unpredictable rainfall patterns. So what are we going to expect because of these changes in climate? First of all, vector-borne diseases and their vectors are going to be differently distributed. There will be a reduction in food production of vulnerable populations, especially to work under the heat that is normally found as a result of climate change and due to a lack of water. They will also be affected by the quality of arable lands and ecosystem services. No water, drought would affect agriculture and affect the whole food chain. And the increase in water-related diseases such as diarrhea due to poor water quality and, of course, poor hygiene. So what are we already experiencing? We are already experiencing in Latin America, and it has been identified by a number of speakers. There's an extensive drought have led to water management, especially collection of rainfall by roof water collecting and harvesting and by storage of water in tanks and drums. The hot, dry conditions have resulted in changes in the behavior of the mosquito vector, including dengue, yellow fever, chikungunya, and the recent introduction to the region of Zika virus, with a major vector being Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. Just for information, annually there's over 1 million cases of dengue in the Caribbean and Latin American region. And the recent introduction of chikungunya, within 2 years, over 1 million people were infected. And this is the mosquito that vectors chikungunya, dengue, Zika, yellow fever. And where do they normally breed? It's in and around houses, in your tires that you have left outdoors, in buckets, in drums, and of course in natural breeding sites. So how did climate change affect this? If you look at it from 1959 onwards, there's been a movement of the mosquito from the natural environment to artificial containers. And you can see the list there of mosquitoes actually moving back into natural breeding sites, which are tree holes, plants, especially bromeliads and other water-holding shells of plants. So the evidence is there that the mosquitoes are now moving back into natural breeding sites. And therefore, that means they are actually performing some sort of behavioral change. In addition to that, the mosquitoes are now adapting to underground breeding sites, like water sewage systems. They're actually going into underground drainage systems and into septic tanks. So they are now moving from the surface to under the ground. There are also effects, and a couple of speakers have identified the issue of temperature. That with respect to temperature, mosquitoes that are in containers that have been heated up to over 34 degrees, they actually got a high mortality rate. So the immature mosquitoes are dying. And therefore, what is expected is that we will find that mosquitoes would be moving from the surface to subterranean breeding sites, because there is no way that these mosquitoes can withstand the temperatures. These here is a list, and the ones that are in red just gives you an idea of the kinds of temperatures that are experienced at breeding sites. There's actually a 47 or 49 degrees, which resulted in a 100% mortality. So I'll just leave that for you to look at them. And so you can see that the different containers are now experiencing different temperatures of water. And the different temperatures of water are then leading to high mortality rates in the mosquito population. Well, if the temperatures are going up to 49 degrees, the IPCC report, the fifth report, indicated that the temperatures will go up by 4 degrees. But this has already far exceeded what we have recorded at breeding sites. There are studies that have been conducted in the field which support that mosquitoes within containers that exceed 34 degrees are really dead when you inspect those containers. So they are actually free of these disease vectors. So mosquitoes at breeding sites are expected, are exposed to urban and rural environments, may affect a decline due to a lack of rainfall, drought, or increase due to water shortages. Experimental studies suggest that Aedes aegypti may have moved to underground environments because of a combination of factors, not only temperatures, but due to drought and probably problems of rainfall or changes or variability in rainfall patterns. This is already being identified in a number of countries. And here you can actually see in Cali, Colombia, they identified sewer systems. In Puerto Rico, were also identified. In Mexico, and also in Trinidad and Tobago. So what impact are these changes going to have? We expect mosquitoes to be now living in dark conditions in sewer systems. And what these dark conditions are actually doing is reducing the fecundity, but not the longevity of the mosquitoes. So mosquitoes are living much longer in the cool, dark environments, so up to 49 days, whereas up to 30 days are observed on the surface areas. So females are becoming infectious after 18 to 20 days after the first blood meal. So the mosquitoes from the subterranean environments got 19 extra days in which to transmit dengue and chikungunya. For example, mosquito populations, therefore, the impact on the individual, the community, and civil society would be that mosquito populations will increase because they are being produced from two different sites, the surface and underground. This will directly influence the community and civil society as mosquito production densities will increase and will be difficult to control for these subterranean breeding sites. Therefore, Aedes aegypti females can be considered as super infectors of dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. So what are we expecting from the environment? What we're expecting is that mosquitoes from the urban environment will therefore move towards sewer systems, storm drains, service manholes, and to cemeteries as the temperatures rise. While in the rural communities, and I know there were some controversies about the definitions of urban and rural, but I'm not going to get into that. So in terms of the rural communities, they would go back to the tree holes, parks, and also backyard gardens, etc. So what is the responsibility of the community and civil society's responsibility? Therefore, underground breeding sites serves to maintain mosquito populations in the dry season in LAC countries, in the same way that populations are maintained in the temperate countries where they sometimes stay in underground storm drains and in sewer systems in the USA and in Italy. So underground breeding sites may become the norm for LAC countries, and appropriate control strategies must be developed. The epidemiology of patterns of dengue and chikungunya would also change because the disease will now, or clusters, will now be found in close proximity to woodlots, close proximity to subterranean breeding sites, as opposed to in and around houses. So forested areas may be a key area for dengue transmission sites. So strategies may have to be developed to control vector populations, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean, taking into consideration these behavioral changes. So the conclusion is that the current evidence suggests that Aedes aegypti mosquitoes will move to cooler underground breeding sites and from the urban habitats to cooler forested areas in Latin America. And therefore, the behavioral change will shift the balance of responsibility for the mosquito and dengue, chikungunya, control from the individual to the community and civil society. And the community spaces and the individual homes will also be a priority for control. Thank you.